Hey, what's up? Welcome back to the MindShare podcast. So picture this. You've got a seller who refuses to drop their price, a buyer who wants a deal, and three other agents fighting for this exact same listing. Sound familiar? This market is tough, and negotiation is not optional anymore. It is survival. This is episode number 375. She's a globally recognized negotiation expert, keynote speaker, and the author of Say Less, Get More. She works with entrepreneurs, sales professionals, and leadership teams around the world, including teaching leaders at Microsoft, Rolls-Royce, and Walmart how to negotiate and win high-stakes conversations. Her whole approach is simple. Negotiation isn't about being aggressive. It's about being intentional, prepared, and emotionally intelligent. Joining me on this episode of the MindShare podcast is Fotini Iconomopoulos. Fotini, welcome to the MindShare podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for getting the name pronunciation right.
Listen, I've taken months to practice that. No, I told you prior to you being at the mastermind, I made sure to get that down. So I'm glad that we hit it again today. But it's funny because every time I go to it, I'm like, say it right, Dave. Say it right. Great to have you here. You recently spoke at our MindShare Mastermind. It's funny because I say recently as if it was yesterday, but it is amazing how fast time flies. That was back in September, but I do recall you were certainly a crowd favorite. You brought amazing insights, incredible energy. It's not often that I feel like somebody's matching mine in a room at the front of a room, but you certainly did that and more. But seriously, you gave everybody a ton of awesome info, some incredible learning, and the opportunity to engage with you, which I know a lot of people found incredibly valuable. And that all of it in an effort to make them better at the negotiation table. So today's kind of like an extension of that, a different setting, a wider audience. Obviously, we had a small room in our mastermind of just 30 people. But I do want to take the time that we have together today to make the most for our listeners, as always. Now, most agents think that negotiation is about being persuasive, about being aggressive. And we experience a lot of people who bring absolutely no strategy and no class to the table when the time comes. At our mastermind, though, and I want to go back there because with everything that I was going to sort of poke and probe you with to kind of open up the conversation for our audience, I remember that there was one thing specifically that you called the 5 steps to negotiation, which you almost use as this framework, if I'm understanding correctly,
Yeah.
that you use as a framework to almost get through everything you went through with the group that day. And I know there was a ton,
Yeah.
but before we get into real estate examples, can you walk our listeners through what that actual framework is?
Yeah, and I mean, this is a more high-level framework than what I introduce in my books and what I typically do in keynotes. But this is it gives people probably an anchor or a visualization of what am I doing? What does this transaction even look like? Because most people zoom in on, the handshake stuff, the proposals moving across the table, but the actual negotiation process starts way before that, and it continues long after the handshake as well. So if you think about the very first step, if you're going to go into a transaction with someone, whatever that transaction might be, it might be a real estate transaction, it might be hiring somebody, it might be, I don't know, negotiating for space on the subway, but you have to start by prospecting. Who are the appropriate people? Have I done my homework on who I'm dealing with right now? Do I know what I'm getting myself out into? Do they have the things that I need? And do I have the things that they need? Is there an even opportunity? Who is the one with whom I'm going to have the right opportunity? So you're doing your homework, you're just doing your research. Then once you've done the research, then you need to get into what I call the need recognition phase. So it's making sure you understand why you need them, because maybe you need to find ways to reduce the need on them. Is there something I can do to strengthen my position? Is there something else that I might be missing? Can I get it from somewhere else? And more importantly, can you demonstrate how much they need you, right? Can they recognize how much they need you? Because that's where the power dynamics start to shift in your favor. Because oftentimes, no matter what the circumstances are, even outside of real estate, people say to me, I don't have any power. They could go with someone else. They could do this other thing. They could buy another house. They could whatever. But why you? What is it that you have that they need? And how do you communicate that in a way to set yourself up for success. So this is the power dynamic kind of foundation. But then people are like, great, I set the foundation. I feel super powerful. Let me go in and go for the close. But they're missing an important piece. There's a step before that where you have to think about objections. How are you going to handle objections? What could come up? Is it going to be things are too expensive? Things are moving too slowly. I want a bigger house. I want a smaller house. Whatever. What are the possible things that are going to come up? Because a lot of this stuff is predictable, right? One of the reasons why people hire me is they say, I know they're going to say this and I know they're going to do that. I'm like, that's great. And they're like, why is that great? Because and knowledge is power. So what are those things that are going to come up and how do you get ahead of them? How do you take the wind out of their sails? How do you prevent them from, throwing that up as a problem? How can you say, I've already considered that. And despite all of that, I know I have a great solution for you. So that, again, affects the power dynamic significantly. Because if you wait until after, but they go, but here's all the problems. As soon as those buts are introduced, now you're just playing defense, right? So we want to be able to make sure that we're covering more ground. That means being a bit more on the offense. So you got to do the work in order to give yourself the space to be able to do that. And that means thinking about those objections before you go into the next phase, which everybody's familiar with. This is the one where they want to go straight in for it. This is the close. So what are the proposals going to sound like? How do you get them to say yes to something? How do we get alignment? That's the alignment phase. In fact, I should probably call it alignment instead of close on all of my diagrams, because close just sounds a bit more aggressive. You used the word earlier, and I cringe. Like my shoulders go up to my ears when I hear that word. But this is the alignment part. So how do we get aligned on it? But before you even actually make those proposals, you still have to think ahead to one more step. And that is the delivery and follow-up. So when I'm getting alignment, I also need to make sure I'm thinking about who, what, when, where, and how. If we say we're going to close this deal, when is it going to happen? Who's going to do what to make sure that happens? How are we going to make sure that things go smoothly? I mean, I think back to when I renovated a house for the first time, and that was like the biggest nightmare ever. I had already thought about, what about delays? How do I make sure I keep him on track? What is he going to do in the event that he finds asbestos? I had asked all these questions for the aftermath, because I can, get him to close a deal with me at whatever price for this renovation. But what happens if all of these hiccups come up along the way? And now we have to do what? Renegotiate everything we negotiated. So you can, again, create a lot of prevention by just thinking ahead to that last final step. What happens after the deal is closed? Because you can actually bring that into the alignment phase. You can bring that into the objection phase. You can bring that into the need recognition phase. So a lot of this comes from the prospecting. What do I know about this person? Do they have a reputation of actually following through on stuff? Are they reliable? All of this stuff can be found out if you do the appropriate level of preparation. So again, the 5 phases are prospecting first, then need recognition, then handling objections, then and only then can you get into that close or alignment, but not before you've thought about what is that delivery and follow-up phase going to look like.
So I've got, so step 3 was handling objections kind of / why you, is that right? Or is it step 4 was handle objections?
Step 3 is handling objections. Step 1 is the research phase. It's the prospecting. Yep. Do we even have a match?
Step 2 was need recognition.
Number 2 is the part like, do we recognize that we have a match? How much do you need me and how much do I need you? And how can I change that in my favor, right? It's communicating that. Mm-hmm. Step 3 is the handling objections. Before you get into the closing stuff, make sure you've nipped that in the bud, get ahead of it rather than getting caught by surprise by it later or changing the power dynamics later. And then that's when you can go into, now that we've aligned all those things, now that we understand what are the objections ahead of us, we can work around some of those obstacles to get to our alignment, but not before we've thought about what are the things that are going to come up along the way so that we can negotiate them now.
Got you. So I had step 5 as close / alignment.
That is what I mean. You can, they're synonyms, one and the same. Okay. I just prefer the word.
Yeah, exactly. So step 4, sorry, what would you sort of like identify as step 4 then?
Sorry, that is step 4, because step 1 is prospecting, step 2 is need recognition, step 3 is objections,
right?
Step 4 is that alignment phase, and then step 5 is the follow-up and delivery. But you can't complete step 4 without thinking about step 5.
Yeah. Okay, cool. No, I wanted to get that clear because again, I listen. I know being in a room with you and like watching you go and listening to all the information you got going on. I know I was taking a ton of notes that time, and I wanted to make sure that everybody here, because you've got a ton to share, that they're able to take this away and go, okay, wait a second. If I sort of, compartmentalize everything she's saying, now I can break it down in my mind, go, what did she say? I've got a note for it, and they can action it. So,
well, and before you go on from that, one of the reasons why the numbers weren't sitting with me is because I don't think of them as numbers. When I present them to my teaching class, it's actually a cycle. And the reason it's a cycle is because in that delivery and follow-up, you could be setting up your next prospecting session.
Right.
You could be setting up your next cycle, your next close, because
Or
oftentimes
having to
we
deal with
are.
another objection and having to go
Yeah.
back. Right. Yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah,
and
yeah. I see what
oftentimes
you mean.
we're negotiating over and over again with the
Yep.
same people, right? So
Yep.
it's thinking about this as a cycle as opposed to a one-time we're finished kind of thing, because your digital footprint is out there, your reputation is out there. Like, you're setting yourself up for the next cycle, maybe with the same person or maybe with someone else, depending on how this one goes.
So let's make this practical then. Like, for agents, right away, what would you say is the number one mistake that people are making when it comes to negotiation that's really costing them money, costing them credibility?
Well, number one, I'd say they talk too much. So, I mean, there's a reason there's a number of reasons why we titled
You
my
talking to me? No, joking.
we titled my book Say Less, Get More,
Yeah.
right? Because, and that's really hard for salespeople in general to do. It's also really hard for people in the real estate world to do, because the misconception around great negotiators and great deal makers is that they're the ones, the fast talking kind of folks. But you got to go through those first steps. If you don't do a great job of asking questions and listening to that information, you're not going to have the prospecting you need to close a great deal. You're not going to know how much they need you to close a great deal. You need to be able to make sure you steer the conversation, but you're not taking over by talking during the conversation. So you can be in control and using fewer words. And when you can do that, that means they're going to be filling those spaces and giving you all the information you need to set up that alignment that you need. But too often what I find is people want to go into the talk. Let me give them all my unique selling points. Let me sell them on this house really hard. But you haven't listened to why they may actually be aligned or not be aligned to that. So that's where I feel like they rush to the close so quickly, they don't listen and get all the information they need. So that's when I say less, get more is true, because you might think, but I'm doing the sell really well, I'm going to get to the close a lot faster, Fotini. Like, I don't have to wait all this time and have these conversations. But you're going to be dealing with objections and convincing them and redoing things because you didn't take the time earlier to say less. It's a much more efficient way if you can just pause first, get the information you need, then you won't have to do as much of that selling, and in order to try and get them to the close.
Listen, we know that when it comes to any type of sales, it's, listen, probe, ask open-ended questions, let the people on the other side talk. So the question here would be, one, a lot of people have heard that part of things before, but for some reason cannot put it into action.
Yeah.
Why do you think, or why do you know, that when we look at like smart, experienced pros, why do they still mess this up under pressure? Like, why is emotion usually going to hijack their logic around what they should do to what they actually do?
It's the same reason why AI can't take over your job that easily. It's because
Oh, I got
we
so
do
much to say
not
on that.
we do not do things based on logic. We do them based on emotion. And so that amygdala, that fear center of the brain, is the same part of the brain that processes anxiety as it does as excitement. That is what takes over, and that reduces your ability to have logic in the moment. And the reality is, we don't make decisions based on logic. We make them based on emotion. Real estate agents know that better than anybody else. Your prospective sellers are going to say, but my house is worth so much more. Look at all these memories I made here. Look how amazing it is. They're emotionally attached to it, so they attach a higher value. It makes no sense on paper. You look at the comps, you look at the build, the quality, all this kind of stuff, but you can't convince them because they're so emotionally attached to it. It's this thing in their brain that crowds all of the other logic out of it. So when you're feeling pressure, right? And pressure could be, I have to detach emotionally from something. Pressure could be, I have to pay money for something. Pressure could be, it's change and I just don't like it. Pressure can be, they may not like me and I'm insecure and I want to make sure everybody likes me. Any kind of pressure like that in the moment is what clouds that logical judgment and makes that emotion take over. It's why, everything can't be done by robots, is because people don't respond to logic. Robots are logical, but people are not. So we've got to be thinking about not just our own emotions, but what are the emotions of the other party? Because the numbers aren't going to make it work.
Empathy.
Yeah.
Empathy, emotions. Absolutely. Hey, listen, I make the joke when you bring up the whole, with AI and not being able to take over the jobs, listen, and to everybody listening right now, that's the big message that you've heard me say time and time again in the different columns, the different talks, the different podcasts. It's the emotional part of it. It's the connection with a real human being. That is what AI cannot replace. And if we continue to put AI and technology in between us and our people, we're going to start to give people the idea that maybe it could. In saying that, to what you just said, nailed it. logic versus emotion, we do operate on emotion. We're not on logic. We're not on strategy. We're typically that way. And so understanding that that's the way both sides are dealing with things, now it does allow us to have somewhat of a leg up in the way we deal with things. Now, in this market specifically, when we look at and we think about negotiation, we think about what's happening out there, and we've got sellers that are stuck on one price. We got buyers that are looking for deals from an affordability perspective. From the 5 steps you just mentioned, and to take people back, because again, for the folks that are tuned in right now, they're the ones in the trenches that are dealing with all of this, and they're pulling their hair out in some cases, going, "What do I do next?" When we look at, again, the seller stuck on price and buyers having affordability issues and looking for those deals, which of those 5 steps that you just mentioned becomes almost most important when both sides, really dig in? Is there one particular step there that's really going to give us an edge, maybe as a starting point? And I'm going to take a guess here, actually. And I'm going to answer that and go, am I right when it comes to the research stage?
Yeah, I really do think that's the foundation for all of it. Without the appropriate research, you don't know why they need you so much. Without the appropriate research, you can't anticipate some of those objections. Without the appropriate research, you don't know what's going to be valuable in order to get that alignment and what could go wrong in the follow-up and delivery and so on. You might not get all the answers during the research, but it's going to give you the foundation to ask the better questions to refine all the rest of the information you need as you go along.
Okay. So now I know when we were, and it's funny because I can like see you illustrating this to the room, which I thought was great, because you walked over to the door, you grabbed onto the door handle. No, but you remember where I'm going here, because you were talking about the anchoring effect, right? Because I brought this up to you, and I've said it before, and I'm putting myself in the fire right now with you, because I know we see this a little bit differently. However, I had said to you something about putting the number on the table first. Mm-hmm. And, you and I had a little banter about that in a good way, but want to ask you about that. You talked about the anchoring effect. If you could tell us more, who should put the number on the table first? Why does that matter so much? And how should agents be thinking when they think about anchoring when it comes to negotiating offers and even pricing the listings?
So let's backtrack for a second and talk about what is the psychology of anchoring. So I want you to think about, what does an anchor on a boat do? When you drop an anchor on a boat, it keeps you from drifting out to sea, right? It keeps you in one general area. You may stray a little bit from it, but you're going to stay in the general area. And so the example that you were thinking about in the room was, I went to one side of the room. I said, okay, David, you're on the other side of the room and I'm on my side of the room. Now, what is the most efficient way and most effective way to get you to my side of the room? Is it to leave my side of the room, walk all the way over to yours, expend my energy, my calories, all that kind of stuff, and drag your dead weight back to my side of the room? Or is it to anchor myself in my side of the room, maybe grab my chair or something and say, come and get me, drag me out of here? Which one is going to conserve more of my energy and keep me closest to my side of the room?
Anchoring, staying where you are.
Yeah. And so the anchoring effect, when we look at the neuroscience of it, the psychology of it, is first impressions are lasting impressions. It's been anchored on the subconscious brain. It's not impossible to drag them out to sea, but it's going to be a lot harder of a journey. And the first impression doesn't necessarily mean it's your official proposal. The first impression could be the comps in the area or something like that. But it's a number or it's an idea that's now planted on their brain that they're going, I'm going to stay in this general vicinity just because this is what my subconscious brain is now more attached to. There's actually a relevant real estate example. I wish I had the actual study to quote you, but I can give you the gist of it. Mm-hmm. It was done in California way before COVID, because I was teaching this when I was doing my MBA student stuff back in 2015, and I came across it. And it was, they told real estate, they asked real estate agents in California, and they said, how do you determine the appropriate list price? Do you take, it wasn't the list price. How do you evaluate a property? Like if you're showing up to a client for the first time, you say, this is what your house is worth. Mm-hmm. And of course, all the agents said, well, we look at these 4 factors. We look at comps, we look at walkability score, whatever those factors were. And they said, none of them mentioned list price as the way they evaluate, right? So 2 groups of real estate agents. One was given the spec sheets, no list price on it. The other was given the same spec sheets, but in the tiny right-hand corner, it had the list price of the house. And not surprisingly, the ones who had that tiny little right-hand corner number, even though it wasn't like front and center, and they said This is not what I factor valuations on. They seem to line up so naturally with the list price that was in the corner, because our brain subconsciously goes, oh, if someone else said that number, that's my first impression. It's not easy to neutralize that. You're going to have to do a lot of work to neutralize that. The same way on a boat, you have to do a lot of work to lift that anchor back up. It's not impossible, but it's a lot more energy. So when you think about listing or trying to convince your seller, for example, what their housing price should be, if you go out there and you say to them, how much do you want for your house? You're letting them drop that anchor and go, I'm not leaving this area. I want $5 million for my house. Anything less than that is going to be a disappointment. Now you're fighting an uphill battle to try and get them away from this idea of 5 million. But if you were to say, well, look, I did some research, my prospecting, right? I did some research, and, based on the comps and how old this house is and what's out there, and, how many buyers are around, and the best practices and what we've seen patterns and so on, it looks as though a house like this could command a price as high as $3 million. Maybe there's some other things that we can do to increase it, or certain conditions might lower that. But that's, I need more detail to really figure that out. But that's the general vicinity. What were you hoping to get for this? And now they're thinking, well, I was thinking a lot more than that. But now, oh, he told me this and he told me that. Like, before you can even put that number out there, you're giving them this need recognition. You're giving them your credibility. You're increasing your power. And they go, I need this person because they clearly know a lot more about this market than this number I just pulled out of thin air, that's based on my emotion or whatever it is. You're going to have a much more efficient discussion if you follow this order of events and you get your number out there first. Now, for listing prices, there's different levels of tactics and mechanics depending on the circumstances. So maybe you want to list really low to drive bully pricing. That depends on the power dynamics in the market.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to list aspirational and try and get as close as possible to that. There's a lot of other, nuance to it versus just saying the anchoring effect is what it is.
So, okay. So if agents do wait for the other side to speak first, are you suggesting that they're already essentially negotiating from behind?
Pretty much. I mean, that's what the anchoring effect tells us. It's just, you're fighting against their subconscious. Like I said, it's not impossible.
Listen,
you've got to be really succinct and really surgical about it.
I'll tell you, I for a long time, and I've used it and it works, where it does depend on situation, and it depends on like what's the product, or is it service or whatever. But by asking about a budget and asking them what it is and asking them why they think that way and doing the open-ended probe to figure out where did you come up with your numbers, then, hey, can we take a look at what the numbers are telling us, show them the numbers, demonstrate that, then re-ask the question around, hey, what do you think now? And I have found that strategy works as well. Now I say as well because I've now, I guess, learned from you on this particular topic twice live in person by asking you questions. The first time around, this might be the third time, because you and I spoke about it on the phone. We spoke about it at the event. We're speaking about it now. I'm understanding you more today, not because you weren't clear the first time, but more it is sinking in. And I like where you're coming from with the anchoring, and I see why you're going that way. So I can see it being incredibly effective and impactful. So let's do this then.
Let me add something in there before.
Yeah, go for it.
Because I'm not saying, like I said, it's not impossible to get
No, I got that. Yeah.
First. I'm saying it works because you did so much work. I'm suggesting if you were to try it a different way, it actually might be a more efficient conversation. You may not have to do as much work to get them to the same.
And that's what got me today, because I sat there going, okay, so hold on, up in the top right corner, where are they at? The anchoring. Yeah, at this point, it's a different strategic approach. And I think that even in saying that, for everybody tuned in, one thing that is very important to always keep in mind as well is you're not Fotini and you're not David. So you're not going to say it the way I do or the way she does. It is about taking what you're learning right now and being able to put it in your words. And that comes right back, Fotini, to one of the first 5 steps we just talked about there, earlier on, right? Of doing the research and the need recognition and understanding who are you talking to, because I think that also sets the stage.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I threw another one at us and said, based on market right now, there's a lot of commission compression going on. There's pressure out there. People are asking to or being asked to drop their commission. There are a lot of agents that are doing it because they just need to get the deal. I don't believe that by any means that's strategically the right move in saying that it's happening. So the question here would be, if I'm at a listing presentation and the seller does start to negotiate my commission, how do you suggest I handle that conversation. What's one practical strategy that they could use to protect that value without losing the client? And I know, and I'll just sort of throw these out there because I think that, again, looking at my notes when I was with you in person, there was the things like the if you then I.
Yep.
There was the 3 options, and there was no round numbers.
Yep.
See, I was taking notes that day.
Yeah.
But seriously, what do I do? I'm being asked to negotiate my commission or drop it. Where do I go?
I would, first of all, I would ask your listeners to zoom out a little bit.
Okay.
And say, you know, what are the repercussions of actually following through and dropping your commission numbers? Because people talk, right? So do you want to be known as somebody who has a different commission for one person than another? Is that part of your value alignment? And is that something you want to be known for? If it is, if you're like, hey, I'm going to give the best price to the person who negotiates the best with me, that's cool. That's your choice of model. But if you don't want to be known as that person, then you have to be thinking about, how do I make sure that whatever I say aligns with who I'm presenting I am? Because trust in your world is also really important. So that being said, if the listeners decide, oh, you know what, I don't want to be giving different pricing or different commissions to different people, then you've got to look at, I mean, I talked about this with speakers recently too, because it's the same thing. People are like, how should I set my price for every time I have a conversation? I'm like, you're not setting a different price every time you have a different conversation, because then you don't have a lot of integrity. If everybody goes, well, they got that price, how come they didn't get that price?
I just said that to somebody the other day.
Yeah, you're setting a value. If you say, look, I operate with this value, my value comes from being able to collect this much commission. If that's not something you can afford, I'm open to conversations to close the value gap. Right? Would you prefer to do it based on, you know, credit later? Would you prefer to do it where I take away some of the things that I'm bringing? Like if your commission includes stuff like marketing and so on, you can say, look, if you want this lower number, if you're willing to do less marketing in your house, which could potentially result in a lower price or fewer buyers coming through, I would consider doing, you know, but the value you're offering at this commission price has to be consistent. If you're saying, hey, I'm willing to move off of that price, but the value that you're getting is going to change, you set it up in a way that makes it sound less appealing to them. Or you just make it, well, that's non-negotiable. People like me who charge this fee are doing this, this, and this. And I'm sure you'd be really pissed off if you heard someone else down the street was getting a better price from me. And therefore, you know, how do you trust anything that comes out of my mouth? And trust is one of the reasons you came to me in the first place. So you can frame it in a way that it's a good thing, that you're keeping your commission whole. The other thing, another way to frame it too, is to say, look, based on the commission rate here, that's getting me you're getting my full attention, my full efforts, and so on. What happens for everybody here to know, and you may even want to communicate this to your client, is when you drop that price, you're not nearly as invested. And actually, I was just talking about this with my own realtor last week. We talked about the fact that when I bought my first condo from him here in downtown Toronto, I ended up going with him because we had a great first meeting and he lived in the building that I wanted to get into. So he had the inside scoop. And he said, you know, I had just met him a week before, and he said, there is a unit that I know is going to come on the market because this person reached out to me and asked me if I would be willing to lower my commissions to work with him. And he said, I don't do that. That's not, you know, you're welcome to go find someone else who does. I don't think they're going to deliver what I can deliver. And he lost it, right? He didn't get the listing. But he said to me, I know the listing is coming. And I know the price he's supposed to go at, and I think he's going to go less than that. He ended up getting the agent who was willing to go on a lower commission. He ended up listing it at a much lower price because that agent was just like, get it off my hands. I'm not making my full commission. I don't care if it sells for $10,000 more or $20,000 more. I just want to get whatever commission. It's like, it wasn't important enough to him to just go, I just want it in and out the door. Right? So he said, this is going to be listed under where it should be. So I got a steal of a deal on it. Right. I got in there early. We got the offer in before anybody else could even see it. It was a whole mix of tactics as well as just having that inside scoop. So the person who was going for the lower commission agent, this is a case study for all of your other agents out there, ended up getting a worse price than he would have had he paid the full commission. Like he pocketed less money had he not just paid the full commission to my agent because he got somebody who wasn't fully invested. That's what happens. You get what you pay for. In essence. So if you're trying to get a discount, you're going to get a discounted a budget service that may not get the most buyers through, the best listing price, the most effort, all of those other things. So you can find a way to frame that to people to go, here's what I offer, and this is why the pricing is the way it is. If you want something that's going to offer less than that, we can talk about a different way to work together, but you can't start discounting what you offer and expect to give them exactly the same things. But if it changes, if the size of the package changes, if you say, I'm buying fruit, but are you buying an apple or are you buying a grape? If you want to talk about grapes, happy to talk about grapes. They're a different price point than the apples, but don't start discounting the apples when you want to be able to deliver everything that you want to deliver. Because again, it's still your reputation on the line. I have referred so many people back to my agent because he's so good at what he does. And if you're not good, if you don't have the integrity, if you don't have the trust in a business that is so dependent on referrals, good luck.
You nailed it. I told somebody that the other day, and he came back to me with like, sort of a counter offer, and he said, think about it. I said, there's nothing to think about. This is what it is. My credibility is more important than anything right now, or even more important than getting this deal. And there are people out there that have worked with us at this level, and this is the level we play at. This is where we're comfortable. He said, well, think about it. I said, like I said, there's nothing to think about. I appreciate you calling. I appreciate your interest. We will be here when you're ready.
Yeah.
And you got off the phone. He was a little bit pissed off about it, but like it is what it is, right?
The only thing to think about is there a way for them to close the value? If they can't do it for you in commission or price, is there another way for them to close the value? If they say, look, we're also coming up on selling a rental property. If you can do this commission for me on this, I'll also give you that other one. Well, now all of a sudden you're going, okay, now I don't have to spend time and energy hunting for my next one. Now I'm getting more value out of this. That might be something that is useful to me, right? How can they close the value gap versus just trying to hard bargain on that one condition? You got to get something out of it. That's where what we talked about in the room was the if you, then I. Yep. So that's the conditional trade. Can you come up with something to fill in the blanks? If you do this thing for me that closes the value gap, then I would be willing to do this thing for you on commission. If there's something that they can contribute in that if you that closes the value gap, great, consider it. If they're not, if they're just trying to bring you back and go, no, I'm demanding this lower thing, is that somebody that you should be working with? And I say this with all of the grace for the people out there who are like, I just need to pay my bills. I get it. But you've also got to think short-term bill paying, long-term reputation as well.
Long-term reputation is always crucial. Let's take a quick commercial break here. Before we dive deeper, it's important that I mention that this episode is sponsored. This episode of the MindShare podcast, of course, the MindShare podcast, is sponsored and brought to you by Kits Keep in Touch Systems, your ultimate marketing and lead generation CRM. If you're in real estate, you need kits. And REM Real Estate Magazine, Canada's premier magazine for real estate professionals and industry stakeholders for news, analysis, and commentary on Canadian real estate. While you're listening, make sure you head over to mindshare101.com, grab your free copy of the Ultimate Marketing Bundle. And of course, if you're ready to grow your business with coaching, group training, or want to bring momentum training to your office, get in touch with me, get in touch with my team. We are ready to help you. So Fotini, we were just talking about the, listing price and anchoring and commissions and strategy around that. You mentioned the word offer, and I thought I'd take us to that side of the equation now and say, when making an offer, how do you recommend setting it up to win before price even becomes the issue?
Walk me through a scenario so I understand what you're saying.
I'm looking, and I've got a property that I really like. I've instructed my agent, let's go ahead. We've come up with an offer. I'm now, let's say the person, we're now going to talk to the agent side. The agent says, well, I know the number. I know what I want to offer. How do I make sure that this offer is going to win? And it even comes back to, I don't want to necessarily say anchoring, but to what we said about this is my price. This is where I'm comfortable. When we talked about commission there, this is where I'm at. And, I know for me, and I'm sure for you, there's been times where you submit a proposal even to speak at an event. They ask you how much, and you put it out there and you're like, oh man, I wonder if they're going to accept that price. Right. But where we're going here is to say, I want to set this up before I walk in. I want to be in the best light to be able to actually win. And I know some people they've sent letters and they do videos, and some people sit back and go, I don't care how emotionally attached you are to my home. Show me the money.
Yeah.
But they try to set themselves up to win. So the question again is, how do you recommend setting it up before price becomes sort of the telltale issue, which usually will be, but is there anything you recommend?
Yeah. So it's understanding, again, from the prospecting, what are their priorities and what information are they going on? So I would say that need recognition is really important. And the way to frame up and introduce the language around that need recognition is with what I'm sure I introduced to your group in the room back then, because I feel like I talk about it in every conversation.
Yeah.
The two most powerful words in negotiation: they're credible, they're not aggressive, they're assertive, and they're fact-based. So you use the two words that are based on. So based on comps, based on what you shared with us about the state of the house, based on how quickly you need to move this, based on whatever, right? And you got to hit what the based on is for them. You're borrowing from their accountability and their credibility, right? So anything that could come out of their mouths, anything that they would latch onto, usually third-party objective information is useful here. But what's even more is useful is when you can say, based on what you shared with me. Because when someone hears, oh, I said that, I don't want to look stupid and contradict myself. So I'm going to be more consistent with what I said. And you're setting yourself up for that consistency versus going, you might get the odd person who says, I never said that. Okay, you didn't. But based on what I'm sharing with you today, here's where we're at. So the more you can set yourself up and do the based ons first, because too often people will do the offer and say, here's the offer, and here's all the reasons why for the offer. But it's the reverse order of that. You need to do the need recognition first. You need me because you said this, based on this. You need me because the comps are here. You need me because of whatever. This is why you need to accept my price, right? So you're setting yourself up for success by doing that need recognition first, using this based on style of language, and then you put the offer on the table. So, hey, folks, we did our homework. We took some time to think about it. We try to remove ourselves from emotional attachment and so on, based on how much space we actually need and the speed or slowness in which we can take this search and so on. Here's what we're comfortable with. And then they go, well, I don't like that at all. I'm like, okay, well, is there something that I may have missed in the scenario that you told me about? Did I miss some renovations that you did and so on? And you can also question, rather than you talk yourself out of it, you can get them to talk themselves into it. Well, no, I didn't do any reservations. I mentioned this thing. Has that changed? Did I misunderstand something? Well, no, but there's this other thing. Oh, well,
I love what you just said there. I think that was a big one. Instead of talking them, how did you say that? Talking yourself out of it, they talk themselves into it.
That's just it. They talk themselves
Love
into
that.
it,
Yep.
right? Ask the questions. This is where the say less comes in again. You put your offer on the table, shut up, get them to do the talking, ask a question about it. And if the question is simply, how close can you get to my figure? That's okay too. Because you dropped an anchor. You say, come to my anchor. How can we play in my little, end of the sea kind of thing? Versus, okay, well, what number are you thinking about? How close can you get to my anchor signals? You're going to have to make some movement. So there are these ways about being assertive and being in charge of the conversation without being that demand. Look, if you don't meet me here, I'm out of here. That kind of threat does not get anywhere.
Right.
That's what aggressive screams to me. That's the kind of tactics that go along with those aggressive kind of folks. And they're not received very well. Because even if I wanted to sell you my house, and even if you had the perfect price for me, if you deliver it in a way that is condescending, that is aggressive, that is rude, that is cold or whatever, I'm going to be like, I don't want to give you my house because I'm emotionally attached to it. That's the issue, is that there's still this emotional element of it. So can you take the emotional element out with the based ons? Can you get them to align with their own previous emotions by saying, based on what you shared with me, you said this, let me just remind you of that. Are there ways to get them closer and closer to something that is going to work versus allowing them to take you in all these other directions?
I don't think most people pay attention to how important those moments are of like the actual experience that's happening in the moment, right? Not just what you say, not in just how you come prepared, but how you say it, how you work with the other person. And that's where it comes right back to what you said earlier. And I thought, I'm really glad we broke down those 5 steps as clearly as we did, because research, and there's the preparation that so many people don't do. It's like, oh, last minute, I got to go. And they run in and they think that, ride my laurels and look at the past successes I've had and look at how popular I am or how top producer or awards I make. I've got this, but it's not always the case. Now, before, when we were talking commission, and I had sort of brought this up because I remember like we talked if you, then I, and there was the 3 options. And I want to come back to that because I did put that here and I probably should have sort of piggybacked it more clearly there. And I'm going to take this as a scenario and set you up again on this. So
please,
coming back to commission for a second, and I'm not going to exhaust commission, Moreover, when it comes to what I am offering to do for that commission. So, for
Right.
example, we might coin as our service package.
Yep.
Now, sometimes what happens, and I have this conversation with agents a lot, especially when they're looking at markets like today, which if everybody right now is looking at their business going, what do I need to do to adapt? Then they're doing the right thing. I think if people are just going to sit back and coast and like hope that the market's going to turn around, I think that that's where people are going to get their sort of finger caught in the mousetrap. To saying that, what I've got is people who are asking, they say, I'm thinking about including a pre-home inspection in my package, or I'm thinking about including, free staging in my package. And they ask, what do you think? And I always come back to the dollars and cents, right? What does that service package cost you as the agent?
Yep.
What's it going to cost you from there? And will your commission actually be able to, one, cover that cost, and two, put money in your pocket, because that's why you're in business. And so I've suggested presenting 3 options. Now, I know you've also brought that up before. And so I thought, instead of me explaining more about the way I do it, because it's really 3 options a package, call it, platinum, gold, and silver, or whatever you want to call A, B, and C, 1, 2, and 3. There's a psychology around why people will choose a certain package. But I'm going to turn that to you instead of me and say, why does presenting 3 options work better than 1?
So this is what we call in the negotiation world, in the academia world, multiple equivalent simultaneous offers. Multiple meaning I'm going to make you multiple offers at the same time. Equivalent meaning I don't care which one you choose, because they're probably going to put the same amount of value in my pocket. So maybe I'm not paying for the staging or whatever, which means my costs go down, and therefore I'm cool with what I'm getting in the end and so on. But regardless, the issue is that you're cool with all of the offers on the table. You've got to be all right with putting everything on the table. You have to be all right with them choosing one door, 1, 2, or 3. And then you do them at the same time, because it also helps you to identify some of that information that might have been missing. They went, oh, well, they got really excited about door number 1 and it had this thing, but the door number 3 fell really flat. I guess this other thing I'm offering there isn't really important. So the other thing to think about this too is, like, I read a lot of books on psychology, on decision making, on decision hierarchy, and so on. Think about when you go to a fast food restaurant. And it's totally natural for you to look at the pricing menu and go, why wouldn't I buy the combo? I literally do the math in my head. And I was like, it's cheaper for me to get the drink than to not get the drink.
And not drink the drink.
Go, I don't like the drink. Therefore, why would I spend even 5 cents, even though it sounds like an amazing deal, because somebody else might really enjoy that drink, but I'm not going to drink it. It's going to go straight in the garbage. So why would I spend 5 cents more, even if it's the deal of the century? If it's not useful to me, if it doesn't have any value, then it's a useless deal. So I always look at that kind of stuff. And so we can set up those offers in such a way where you go, here's the gold standard. I have these other 2 options too, but when they do the math, they're like, well, that's not, I could do that. It could save me some money, but I really want the gold standard. It makes so much more sense for me to spend a little bit more to do that. So for example, you could have agents out there saying, look, if you want to take your own pictures, then I can reduce my commission by $1,000 or something like that. I don't know. I'm making up numbers. Mm-hmm. But you also have to educate them on, just so you know, though, if you do your own pictures, the quality of pictures, having the right experience, all that stuff has a significant impact on what offers are going to come in. Because if it's not photographed right, that could affect the total dollars that you're putting in your pocket. So when you give them that package, sure, it sounds like I'm giving you options, but then they're like, but that's not really a great option. Like, I don't like that drink, so why would I buy it? But when you give them those options, they feel, and this is where we've talked about emotion over and over again, they feel like they have a choice. They feel like it's not being shoved down their throat. They feel some sense of autonomy versus somebody demanding things from them. It's a cooperative way of building a solution together. So let me break it down as simply as possible. If you have young kids at home or you spend time around young children, you could say, do you want the broccoli, the cabbage, or the carrots? They're all
neither, vegetables. Mom, neither.
Well, which one do you like? And then you start asking, well, which one do you like the most? Which is, I don't like things that are green. Okay, you don't like things that are green. How could we make the broccoli or the carrots more interesting? Add some butter or fry them up or whatever. Now we're having a conversation, but what are we having a conversation about? Vegetables. We've anchored us in the land of vegetables. We may change the shape of it a little bit, but we didn't give them a chance to anchor us anywhere else. So that's what we're trying to do here too. We're making people feel like they're choosing the vegetables based on their own autonomy. I'm not shoving the vegetables down their throats. So their emotionally,
psychology.
emotionally, they feel really good about coming along with you for this and choosing the option that you're kind of setting up for them. And if I could go back to the other example we started with the anchoring effect,
Yeah.
when you talk about how you do things, you're like, you set them up and you build all of these steps to build trust with them. It takes a lot of energy and a lot of effort to rebuild, because they're like, but I was up here, David, you're disappointing me by telling you this. But every time you give them information, every time you listen to them and say these things and so on, you're building up the trust with them. If you had thought about doing it a little bit differently and building up trust first, they might be like, I'm going to go along with whatever comes out of David's mouth. Right? Like you could say, look, I'm thinking about these, and these factors. Are those factors that you're thinking about? They go, yeah, we're totally thinking about those things. Great. Then we're on the same page. Based on all of those things, here's what I would recommend, instead of asking, what's your budget? Right? So I'm just changing the order of stuff.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
It might make things a lot more efficient. The same way when you say, look, we could do package A, or you could do the value meal, which makes a lot more sense for you. If you do package A, you're missing out on these things, which could affect your list price, which could affect the number of buyers coming through and so on. But I'm open to doing it. It's up to you. But those offers have to be working for you, no matter which ones you put on the table.
Hence, again, why presenting 3 works better than 1. So now let me come to this one, because this is something that somebody taught me years ago. And it was like, well, we'll set the price at like, I don't know, whatever, $1,000, random number, right? Mm-hmm. And they're like, no, set the price at like 1,772. And I'm like, what is that number? And they basically said to me, and this is where the question comes from, is that if you just throw that number out there of 1,000, you didn't think about it, you just threw a number out there. When you start to attach more specifics to that number and make it like, whoa, where did that come from? Now people begin to think, back to the psychology you just brought up, that there's a reason for it. So the question, so that I get your side of the explanation here, why do round numbers weaken your position?
Because it's our perception of those round numbers, right? We round up or we round down. That we know that intuitively because we do that every single day. So our subconscious is saying, if they could round up or round down to that number, that signals there's flexibility around there. That's what's going on at a subconscious level. Whereas if you were to say 1,257, then they go, oh, there's been a lot of work and energy behind this. It automatically increases the perception of credibility. And as a result of that, if they say there's probably not a lot of wiggle room there because they've done the hard math already, I'm not going to challenge them on the math. But when I hear a $1,000 round number, I'm going to challenge them on that math because it sounds like they just rounded up. It's not precise. They must not have done all the analysis. That means there's wiggle room there for me. So you're putting out a perception. Is the perception that you're movable because it's a round number and we move round numbers all the time? Or is the perception that I've done the work, I'm super credible, don't challenge me on it because you don't want to be made a fool when I show you all my math behind this kind of stuff? That's what they're kind of getting at a subconscious level. That's why it works.
So if we looked at something as simple as like a list price and we're like, oh, we think you should list at $599. Would you think $599 is not I'm just looking maybe context in that just to give people.
But there's a difference. I mean, I worked in the consumer goods world for such a long time, and I worked on the Walmart business. I was the Walmart specialist here in Canada, and they spent a lot of time. I got to some really great relationships behind the scenes there. They spent a lot of time testing out things like, does the 99-cent versus the round number work? You will not go very often. It does happen occasionally. You will not go into a Walmart and see a round number. It's not going to be $10.
Like 97 cents or something. Yeah.
They're going to go 7. They're not even going to go 9, right? Yeah. They're going to go 97 cents versus 99. And in certain retailers, they also know if it's like a 96 or a 95, that signals it's on clearance, it's on its way out. So, but there's a difference in terms of the brain. I know we're smart enough. It's the same reason why at home, and in my car, I set my clock 10 minutes fast. My brain knows at a conscious level, I'm a smart woman. I know that I did the 10 minutes fast. So one of my friends came over like, why do you set it up when you already know it's doing it? Because it's that split millisecond where my subconscious brain gets the dopamine hit that goes, oh, I got to do something about this.
Yeah.
I've only got 10 minutes left. It's a different emotional trigger than the analytical side of us that goes, oh, well, here's the number. When they see $599, they're going to round up. They're going to do the math very quickly to get to 600. But when they see 600 and they see that 6 in front of it, that changes the budget that I'm in. I don't know. It sounds much more intimidating. So your choices down to those numbers absolutely have an impact. Now, would I say, do you go as far as 599, 99.99? No, that's just silly.
79.
That's subconsciously the brain goes, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But the subconscious brain needs a dopamine hit to go, ooh, that's just inside my budget versus, oh, that's disappointing. That sounds like it's going to be too expensive.
Okay. No, I like that. So here, there was another one that I picked up from you. I remember, and I think this might actually come back and play into what you just said based on. Um, you also said never use the words "I think."
Mm-hmm.
Why is that type of language so powerful or so destructive when it comes to a negotiation?
So if you want to show up as the person who is credible and authoritative and the expert, and they should follow all of your ideas because you know the real estate market better than I do, and that's why I'm bringing you on board, then you saying the words "I think" signal you're feeling doubtful. So there's a time and place in our everyday conversation for the words "I think." But when in the moment where you want to show up as the credible expert, you saying "I think" signals you don't know for certain. That's what my brain is reading into this. And if I'm feeling doubtful and I'm really nervous because this is the biggest transaction of my life, this is a lot of money on the line. This is me setting up a mortgage for the next God knows how many years. There's a lot of emotion attached to this decision. And when you say "I think," you're playing on my deepest, darkest doubts about you. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if he doesn't know, then I don't know that I can trust him. And I'm feeling really uncomfortable with that or whatever is about to come out of his mouth. That's one reason. The other reason is those words "I think" signal this is opinion. It might be a fantastic opinion.
Yeah.
But it's still signaling
it's just an opinion, right?
Opinion. It's not
no substance.
It's subjective. It's not objective.
And there was no based on.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
The second you change it to a based on, they go, well, whatever comes out of his mouth, he's basing it on something, based on work, based on best practices, based on history, based on gut instinct, based on 30 years of doing this business in the gut instincts. It's based on something. But when you say "I think," yeah, that's your opinion. And now my mirror neurons in my brain, because again, this is all about neuroscience. My mirror neurons are saying, well, if you're signaling doubt, I need to do something about this. And I'm going to signal my thinks to you too. If you're giving me an opinion, then I guess I've got to give you an opinion. Otherwise, I'm going to look stupid by just taking your opinion. And so what are we doing now? We're arguing. If you're saying, I think this neighborhood doesn't pull in those kind of numbers, well, I think you're wrong. I've lived in this neighborhood for a really long time. Based on the comps, this neighborhood doesn't pull in those numbers.
I'll tell you, I mean, we continue to study and learn more and more every single day, always, right? And we continue to get better in crafting our skills. And I've sat there though, on the other end of the sale, of the negotiation, being the buyer, let's say, whether it's real estate, a car, or anything else. And the minute that seed of doubt is planted in my mind, I smell it. And maybe again, it's because I play in this game a lot and I understand it, but like, you've lost me, you're gone. It's done. There's no way that I can't go through. And that's something that's very subconscious, back to the neuroscience. Absolutely. That's something that subconsciously fires in my brain going, that's not the guy for me or the person, whatever, you know what I mean? Like I got to go elsewhere. So,
because here's the thing that people need to understand about the subconscious. It's like your autopilot mode, right? So it's like, it's going to override anything conscious. You might be a smart person who can do all the math and the mental gymnastics and so on. But when the pressure is on, when your brain is overwhelmed, it's just going to go to the easiest road available. It's going to go into autopilot.
Path of least resistance.
Right.
Always.
So your subconscious brain is picking up on these things in a way that you can't even articulate, but it's got years of experience and conversations and so on that it can identify. You might not consciously be able to tell me you heard the words "I think," but at a subconscious level, you heard words like that creep in and you don't know why you heard them or what you heard exactly, but it's signaling to your brain something's off and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do this. So in those moments of pressure, if we go into default mode, that's when we've got to be careful of what is our default mode. How do we maintain composure in those modes? How are we more cognizant of their default modes?
Okay, so here, let's go back to this then, because you actually used these words right off the top of the show when you talked about emotions versus strategy and the way we actually process all this. Bottom line, negotiations do get emotional.
Yeah.
And especially when it's somebody's livelihood. Like bottom line, you know, we're talking about like a house, biggest asset of their life. How would you suggest people stay grounded, manage that stress in that moment instead of just simply reacting and regurgitating whatever emotionally came to their mind? And maybe when I say, how do you suggest it? I might even ask you, because I mean, you've been at the table in some of the biggest negotiations that are out there. You know, you're sitting there on the other side, you know, you've got somebody that maybe just as wise as you are on the other side that might have the same type of education on it all. What do you personally do to stay level when that whole sort of adrenaline spikes and you're in the middle of that negotiation? Obviously, you want to come out on the other side winning.
Yeah. So, I mean, the number one thing, the immediate reaction is breathe, right? Say less for a moment, take a calming breath. Those meditative breaths can have a massive impact. You can read about box breaths or breathing in for 4, holding for 6, out for 8, whatever it's going to take. But when the instinct is, I need to do something about this, my emotions are high, I want you to just take a breath first. Maybe you even have a notebook. I like to write things down all the time. I might write it down so it's out of my brain and onto the paper, and I didn't have to come out of my mouth. And that gives me the time literally to process from my brain to my hand to the paper. Did I get over it? Did I get it out of my system before it came out of my mouth and I can't take it back? The other thing that helps in terms of preventing how extreme those moments are is the preparation up front. If you can anticipate, I know they're going to say something stupid, so when they do, I'm going to be ready for a breath. Or I bet you they're going to say this, this, and this. So that way, in the moment, when you hear those things, you're not going, oh my God, they said this. You're going, oh yeah, my subconscious brain recognizes this. It's not shocked. It's just recognizing a pattern of behavior. So now it's not triggering as many emotions. So that's why preparation is such a big piece of it.
Always.
But the other thing is, especially in circumstances where you're dealing with someone that you're representing and they're going to get super emotional about it, you can remind them that you're the one that's going to remind them of why we're here in the first place. So you need to make sure that you level set a foundation with them. I can give you an example, a non-real estate related one. I was in a lawsuit with a former employer. I had to bring on a lawyer for a discrimination, a human rights case. And when I started working with that lawyer, she said to me, what do you want to get out of this? And I said, I just want them out of my life. And I said, I don't want to lose money, obviously. I know the legal bills can get really high and so on, but I just want them out of my life. That is my number one priority. So when we got into the mediation stuff, the negotiating type stuff, and we looked like we were making progress, and then someone said something that set me off. It was my trigger, right? That's when I was like, forget it. We're not even gonna do this. We're gonna go all the way to court. And she said to me, let me just remind you of what you said to me when we started this conversation. Because even the pros can get caught up emotionally. But that's why I hire somebody to help me in those moments, to be my objective brain.
Smart.
She said, let me remind you, when you said this, you said you want them out of your life. So based on that, if you go down this road of, courts and so on, we could be dealing with them for another 18 months. It's, stressing out every time you get a letter and the next date and blah, blah, blah. I can't guarantee what the costs are. You're on the right side of the law, but there's no guarantees in this kind of stuff. So which of these two paths? So all of these things are coming in, the based ons, the multiple offers, all of that kind of stuff is coming in. And she had the calm brain. That's why I'm hired for other people's negotiations too. That's why you're hired for other people's negotiations, because you can be the person that calms them down. But you need your own coping mechanisms to make sure you can keep your level head there too. But you can say, what did I go in here for? Maybe you want to have it. There was a while where I had my mantra, my why I get out of bed every day on my phone as my screensaver, just to remind my conscious brain and my subconscious brain all the time. And so I could easily pull that up and go, is this helping me achieve my goal today? Then I'm not going to get caught up in it. So you can have a positive mantra, you could have a calming breath, you can write it down, you can do the preparation in advance, you can ask to have your objective person next to you who's got a little more emotional distance from it to pull you out of the spin cycle. There's so many things that you can do, but it is about making sure you manage your emotions so that you can get the better deal.
All amazing insights on that right there. And I would say, again, this comes right back to everybody, what Fotini said off the top about preparation, listening, right? That person on your end was listening to you. And when you were like emotional and went this way, she was like, wait a second, here's what you said. And you're like, oh yeah. Right. And so again, for us being on that side, everybody, everybody tuned in again, always think about that, right? Don't just sit there thinking I got a job and I just got to go do it. Listen attentively, pick up on what you can, and leverage that for not just you, but for your client as well. I'm going to go some quick hits for you now. Okay. As we're sort of just watching the time there but some quick hit answers here. So what would you say is the actual, the biggest myth about negotiation?
It's the fast talkers who get the best deals.
Okay. One phrase that every agent should totally remove from their vocabulary, and we may have already covered this.
Yeah, I would have to go with I think.
Okay. One habit that instantly improves their results.
Ooh, one habit. I would say, can you ask a follow-up question?
I like that. I like that. An open-ended question.
Yeah.
And then what would you say separates real like top negotiators from, average ones?
I'd say it's the preparation. Because when you get really good at preparing, it takes less and less time as you go on, right? Because it's just been embedded as part of your routine.
I wasn't sure if you were going to say that in the previous one there with one habit. Well, my mind was thinking preparation, but I like where you went with that too.
I just feel like the
Um,
talking thing is so much more like common that people just need to rein that in to give themselves a time to prepare.
it's so true. What would you say to anybody who says I can't?
My autopilot response, I've trained my brain to go, how could you?
Oh, I like
Under
that.
what circumstances would that change? It goes back to asking a question. So I hear I can't, and my brain goes, but how could you?
I share that a lot. I've been telling my kids that since the day they were born, like literally the day they were born. We got to the point where like Jennifer turned to me, she's like, they don't understand you. I'm like, they will. They will. And
You're
you've
planting
met
that
Jennifer.
subconscious seed early.
Yeah, you've met Jennifer, but like, she's like, but I'm like, they will. And now what does end up happening is, because we all get to that point where we're like, oh, I can't do it, or oh, it's hard, or whatnot. I can't figure it out. Leah, I can picture her doing this when she turns to me, she's like, Daddy, I can't do it. And I look at her and I just look, not like with mean or angry, I just look at her and she looks at, well, I can, but, and I'm like, okay, perfect. Let's figure that out now.
Right.
Right.
Now
And
you
it's,
can actually
it's,
work on the solution.
it's the empowerment of that. Right.
Yeah.
And I do believe that very much so. Um, the day is over for you. You have kicked butt like you always do every single day. You are truly intelligent and powerful out there. I love the way you operate. Um, Once that day is over and you've done everything you possibly can in your day, how do you, Fotini, know that it's been a successful day for you?
I feel like for me, whether it was in that, the big lawsuit stuff and so on, I ask myself this question: can I rest my head on my pillow at night and feel good about what I've done? Can I live with my decisions? And I don't think I'd sleep a wink if I couldn't. So for me, there's only so much I can do if I know my constraints, if I know how much time I have in the day, and so on. If I go based on my circumstances, can I rest my head on my pillow at night and feel like I've done everything that was possible in that moment? Then that's the measure of success.
That's the question I close out with on every episode. We are on episode 375 today. And I've asked that question certainly more times than just on this show. And I got to tell you, the best of the best, and I include you in that list, never have used the word money when it comes to how they know a successful day. Isn't that, it's interesting, right? It's
Yeah.
interesting because when you ask people what they want most in life, most people immediately say money. And when you really dig deeper into that, it's never about the money.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very cool way to continue to help everybody understand kind of what is most important in life. So once again, a very awesome answer. What final words of wisdom do you have as we close out here? Where can people get a copy of your book? Where can they connect with you? How can they find you? And any, again, last words of wisdom for everybody today?
I would say it comes back to the book title. It's say less. In those moments where you feel like you need to fill the noise or you're feeling pressure, just say less, take a breath, think through what do you need in this particular moment. And if you do want to pick up the book, it's available at all the major retailers. Of course, Amazon there too. If you like it, I would love a review on it because it tells other people that they should be reading it. And you can find me on socials as well. If I didn't get to your questions, at Fotini Icon is the Instagram handle. I made it easy so people don't have to misspell my last name. And I'm also available on LinkedIn. I love getting questions in my DMs, so send them my way, and that just helps me give you better content.
I have practiced that last name many, many times. I write it often when I'm writing all the stuff we do together. So I've got it down, but I could fully appreciate the shortening it for Instagram. To everybody tuned in, make sure you do check out what Fotini is up to. She is absolutely amazing. Again, like I said, had her out at the mastermind, an absolute hit with everybody there. Needed to have you back on the podcast today. So I cannot thank you enough for all the time, all the insights, for joining me on the show today. This lined up absolutely, this couldn't have lined up better as we walk into what's, fingers crossed, hopefully everybody hopes is a busy spring market. Fotini, really, really, really appreciate the time you made for us today, the insights you shared. And now everybody's just got to take what they learned and go out there and leverage it. So once again, a huge thank you to you for making the time today.
Well, thank you for having me. I love getting these kind of like very specific circumstances for the skills that we can help everybody with.
Well, it's awesome. We will continue to keep the lines open here. It's been a pleasure. All right. I want to leave you all with this just as we sign off. Okay. Negotiating is not something you just turn on. When things start to speed up, we need to be prepared. As Fotini just said, we need to have done our research. There's a lot that goes into winning that negotiation. And we all know in this market, especially, there's a lot of folks that have no idea which direction they go with negotiation. And most do it very, very wrong. This is something that you've got to build on and you've got to practice every single day. It's in how you communicate, how you listen, how you hold your ground, how you show up for other people. And you just heard from somebody that literally teaches this at the absolute highest levels. She has been to the highest levels. She works with some of the biggest companies, there are, in the world on this stuff. And if there's one takeaway, that I might leave you with here is say that, deals don't fall apart simply because of a slow market. They fall apart because people have no idea how to have a real conversation under pressure. So if you are an agent, your job, your goal, stop winging it because your income depends on these skills. And if you're a broker, do not assume that your people are just going to, figure it out. Negotiation is infrastructure. It is not a personality trait. Look, you all know how I say it. It's always about being real. It's always about being straight up. And confidence doesn't come from just, kind of hoping that the market will work out or things will work out. It really always comes from, the preparation, the repetition, knowing how to protect your value when people are challenging it. In saying all of that, my name is David Greenspan. As you know, this is the MindShare podcast, and I'm reminding you to build that MindShare because it equals market share. As always, a huge thank you to our friends at Kits and at REM Magazine for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. I want to thank you all for tuning in, and I'll catch you again next week.